episode 2 of Holding Court with April Preyar, the Justice Junkie. I'm a criminal defense attorney from Chicago, and I am passionate about bringing justice from the courtrooms to the corners. And I am interviewing various fascinating people, and actually Dwayne Bryant and I met, I don't know, it was like a month ago on a radio show, and we were both there kind of talking about the same thing. I realized we're kind of in the same realm, but how we ended up there is quite different. So he is a mover, a shaker, a motivator, and a speaker. And he had a very unique encounter, I'll say, with a police officer. And it's really interesting in these times where most police encounters are looked upon as negative. There's a lot of negative media, and you found a way to actually turn what could have been a very negative situation into something that really has blossomed and catapulted you and puts you in awesome spaces. So why don't you tell us how that came to be?
Sure, absolutely. First of all, thank you, April. It's a pleasure to be on your show. I appreciate that. That means I'm moving up in life, all right?
Oh, my goodness.
I was driving from Chicago to Battle Creek, Michigan. I had a speaking engagement there for the Battle Creek School District in front of all of the administrators. And I was driving over the Illinois Tollway. I was doing probably 80-something and a 60-something, but the speed limit had changed, so it wasn't me, it was a speed limit. And when Officer Aaron Weller, Indiana State Trooper, he pulled me over, he said, in Indiana, you're driving 20 miles per hour over the speed limit, and it's considered reckless driving. He said, I can either give you a $500 ticket or take you to jail. I'm like, God, dog, what? And I'm like, okay, jail is no, $500 ticket. And so I was a little nervous. So he told me that I also crossed 3 lanes of highway without signaling. And when he told me that, I was a little alarmed because in Texas a couple of months earlier, Sandra Bland was pulled over, and the white officer who stopped her told her that she had crossed a couple of lanes without signaling. So my first thought was, this is some kind of white code. They're going to try to take me to jail. 2 days later, I'm going to commit suicide. And I'm just sitting here like, grown, educated man, no criminal history. But I'm thinking, this is going to be terrible. So I'm thinking all of these crazy things. I give a quick prayer, and the Holy Spirit's like, yo, you know who I am. Why are you over here afraid of this man? And so I explained to him what I was doing. He brought back a $150 ticket. I said, thank you, can I take a picture of you? And he said, why would you take a picture? I said, because I have students who believe that if a black man have an encounter with a white officer, it's going to be a fatality or something bad is going to happen. And so he said, well, I don't want you to take a picture. And then I said, I want to let them know that you're not the only one with power in the stop, but I have power too. He said, what do you mean by that? I said, well, I have power over my word choices, over my body language, as well as my tone. I said, I didn't curse you. I didn't get out and run. I was respectful of you and you respectful of me. And he said, you understand that? I said, absolutely. And then he said, well, hand me that ticket back. I was like, oh, he gonna kill me now. God dog it. And he took the ticket, he ripped the ticket up and gave me a warning. And I was really moved. I was emotional in that moment. And I was like, okay. So I posted what happened on Facebook. The post went viral. And then that's how we went from this encounter. We were going to create a curriculum. My company does mentoring on first impression with law enforcement, but my curriculum specialist, Crystal, said, you need to write a book. So I wrote a book, The Stop Improving Police and Community Relations, and literally we've had orders nationally as well as internationally. Chicago Public Schools just approved it. The Illinois Secretary of State just purchased books for the library. So now I'm talking to parents, students, teachers, and letting them know, listen, when I ask kids who have power in an encounter, they always say the police. I say, but you have power as well. And they say, we don't have any power. And I say, well, listen, if I teach you that you have no power, then you're someone who are going to be scared and afraid. But you got to understand that you have power, and it's not just a law enforcement officer.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So let's backtrack. You were on your way to Battle Creek because you were already doing speaking engagements.
Yes.
So what were you going to speak? Who are you going to speak to that day?
Sure. So I was going to speak to teachers and administrators. It was back to school. So on my engagements, I always research the district. I look at their report card. So they have a significant amount of minority students, right? And the lowest performers are African-American males, and then females, and then the other. So My company, we did a pilot program, actually more than a pilot, from 2005 to 2011 in Maxton School District 162. We did all of the mentoring for all of their students during the school day. So they learned things such as study skills, time management, goal setting, conflict resolution, the power of words, hope, things of this nature, life management skills to help them navigate life. Literally within 5 years, suspensions were reduced by 70%. ISAT test scores went up 35%. We helped quadruple parental involvement, and we eliminated expulsions, because when you think about the 2010 census, 200,000 individuals left the city of Chicago, and most, 192,000 of those 200,000 were black folk. So they either went to the south suburb or the west suburbs. And so Dr. Blundeen Davis said, listen, we need to be proactive, because we think this is the suburbs, but the suburb is no longer the suburb. The suburb is a reflection of Chicago. So we wanted to be proactive in the work that we had already done in Chicago, because my first mentoring program was at Corliss in 1999. Okay. That year, Corliss had a 10-year high graduation rate, a 10-year low dropout rate, and they had the highest TAP reading and math scores that they had in the previous 8 years when we were doing our program there. So that's when we saw, hey, this stuff really works if you do it well, if you have the right message, the right curriculum, and the right presenters.
I see. Awesome. So you were already doing this work.
Yes.
Before this encounter with the police officer.
Absolutely.
How did your work change as a result of your encounter with the police officer?
Sure. I would say the work became more focused and more purpose-driven, because when you look at our young people, Tamir Rice, when you look at the young people who are getting killed by police, and we always blame the police, but sometimes the acting quotient on our young people, based whether it's fear, whether it's just not knowing the law, they exacerbate their situation, and a lot of times they could go home safely. And when I talk to young people, they have an anger toward the law enforcement. So we do different simulations, and we have parents to come in. I remember we did it in Rockford. So we had one boy to simulate. I was playing a police officer, and his first response was to hit back and like, "You touching me for it?" And the mama was just sitting there like, I said, keep going, don't worry about your mama. So when I was showing him, the first thing you just did was snatch back. If I'm that racist officer, and there are racist police officers, I said, you don't know which officer is coming. This is why you want to understand your response needs to be positive. It needs to be proactively prepared and respectful. And so when the mama saw that, she was just sitting there crying, and she was like, if you had been the wrong officer, my baby would be dead. I said, he probably would be.
Absolutely.
And he also, even though the police officers trained, but some of this stuff he could have prevented. And so that's when I realized this work is crucial. It's very important.
That's why I was so impressed with you when I met you at the radio station.
Thank you. I thought you were rolling your eyes at me like, oh,
I was also, because we don't agree on everything. So yes, we agree about but I think the core of what you talked about is the motorist or the pedestrian or whoever it is who's being stopped by the police or the student in the hallway of the school has power as well, because you always have a choice in the matter. Correct. You have a choice in what you say, and this is where we differ, or not to say anything at all.
Right.
Because I also teach that there's power in that.
Right.
And people don't understand how there is power in silence. Okay. There's power in silence because then you don't have to worry about that officer twisting your words. You don't have to worry about what you're saying being misunderstood, especially for young people who are speaking a lot of times in slang and not being understood by the officer. There's actually a case that came out recently. It's ridiculous when you hear it. The guy was talking to the cop, and finally he shuts down interrogation. Man, I want a lawyer, dog. So it goes up to the appellate court, and what they determined was the officer didn't know what a lawyer dog was. You know, obviously this game playing.
Right.
He didn't know what a lawyer dog was, so he wasn't able to provide one to the defendant. And essentially, the defendant ended up losing that argument because he used slang. And I tell people, don't even use slang. Don't say anything. Because my choice is, if I say nothing, I give the officer nothing to work with.
So question,
the more I say, the more, when I'm trying to talk myself out of it, even if I'm trying to be friendly, we tend to be chatty when we're nervous. And we say too much. And so many of these kids are in prison for life because they said too much.
Let me ask you this. So let's say 3 black guys are walking down the street or driving down the road, whichever one. The police pulls them over, let's say a car, and say, may I have your driver's license? Do you say, you tell them, don't answer? Explain that to me, because I want to know where we differ and how.
So you can give a greeting. You can say hello, smile. I still think that there's power in being kind.
Okay.
But at that point, if a police officer is asking for your driver's license, he's not really looking to talk to you anyway. He wants to see if you're legitimately on the road. Do you even have driving privileges? So hand them your driver's license. In Illinois, hand them your insurance. Yeah, in Illinois, hand them your insurance. If you're elsewhere, hand them your registration and your driver's license. At that point, keep your hands at 10 and 2 and don't say another word.
Got it.
This is the
and
part.
we agree on this part.
But the thing is, you say answer questions.
Well, if he says, do you know while I stop you? I don't say go into, well, yeah, officer, I know I was speeding and I had some drugs in the back.
Don't say a word, because the thing is, when people get nervous, they get chatty. And you're going to be inclined to say oh man, I just got a little bit of weed, or I just had 2 drinks, or I just think, you're going to admit something. So I say nothing at all.
Okay. I'm not opposed to that. But now let's look at this. We got 2 different kind of officers out here. You got the professionally trained, that's serious about their job, that takes their job with pride and their uniform. Then you got this other officer, like the FBI has stated, that the KKK has infiltrated many police and law enforcement agencies. So they're not caring about you and being professional. So let's say you get this guy coming. Do you know while I pulled you over and you just sitting there? So what happens then?
How would the outcome change? If
I
say you pull me over because I'm speeding and you're the racist cop who's determined to kill me that day.
Yeah. So either way, you might just.
Doesn't matter what I say.
No, I agree with that. Either way,
I say silence is always the go-to.
Okay.
Keep your hand in a traffic stop at least. Keep your hands at 10 and 2. We actually just did a traffic stop video as well to tell people. But just as important as it is to stay silent, it's important to not reach. And
Absolutely.
We're always moving for something. We're reaching
Absolutely.
for our phone.
Yeah.
We're fumbling with our purse.
Yeah.
We're reaching for our glasses.
Yeah.
We're, or even gesturing. Like we were joking about, I said I gesture too much.
Right.
So even gesturing, if you're talking to a police officer, he doesn't know what you're doing. He doesn't know you.
I agree.
He doesn't know that's your personality.
And he's probably afraid in the first place.
Exactly. Everybody is, like you said, in your encounter, the 2 of you admitted that everybody was afraid of everybody else. The cop didn't know if it could go bad, and you didn't know if it could go bad.
Absolutely.
So ultimately, everybody wants to make it home. But I want to show off the product of this amazing encounter and the amazing things that have come as a result of what.
Show the workbook.
I got it.
You got it. I'm sorry. It's your show.
This is the book, The Stop, that came out of the encounter, and it is followed up by a workbook. So again, I think that kids, not only just kids, but adults learn in the manner that you said. Role playing, doing simulations, not sitting in a classroom setting, waiting to be lectured to.
Yeah.
It doesn't reach them in that way. So this is fantastic. He has a workbook. He also has this chart here, so why don't you tell me about the challenge?
Sure. Now this is the Stop Challenge poster, because here's the deal. No matter where you start, everyone wants to do the same thing, get home safely. So unlike most charts and graphs, they always tell the citizen, this is what you need to do. But the onus is not on just the citizen, because like you're saying, you can do everything right. But if the officer is racist, if the officer is a dehumanizer, then you can do everything right and they can turn it wrong. So therefore, what I have is a right way and a wrong way every step of the way, and there's 9 different steps. So step 1, it should say to remain calm, know your rights, and be respectful. That's for everybody, not just the officer, because a lot of times people get violated because they don't know their rights. A lot of times they get violated because they're not calm and they're not respectful. So if they at least do everything on the right side and not on the wrong side, it will guarantee that 100% of the time, everyone goes home safely. Not just the officer, but the officer as well as the person. 100% guaranteed.
Whoa.
Guaranteed.
I don't make
guaranteed. I'm making a guarantee.
I don't make guarantees, but you made it.
I'm making a 100% guarantee.
And then we have this workbook. So what's the difference between these 2?
Sure. Well, this workbook here goes with the book. So for instance, we just had Constance and Alea. The mother was reading the book with her daughter, And we want to help children with reading comprehension. We want to make sure they understand the main characters in the story. So each chapter has a series of different questions. Why is the book entitled Stop? Who is Dr. Lee P. Brown? Because we want to make sure they're comprehending what they're learning. We want to make sure that they're using good decision management tools. And we want to make sure our babies can write. A lot of these kids, they text so much, they can't spell, they can't write, and some of them can't even read. So we want to be able to help with that. At the end of each chapter, we have a stop challenge principles. So it says, do not take or borrow or steal anything from anyone without their permission. So there's different elements from each chapter that we want the young people to understand. And then there's a call to action.
Is that from your bike story?
Yes. Oh, you read it? You read the book? What? Borrow bikes, absolutely. We wasn't thieving, we just borrowed the bike. Right.
He got caught before he returned it.
Absolutely. And then this one is the driver's education manual. So this is for 11th and 12th grade students in high school, because there's a new House bill in Illinois, House Bill 6131, that says it's mandatory that every student in driver's ed must have mandatory instruction on police-community relations. Oh. So this satisfies that. We've been endorsed by the United States Congressman Danny Davis. You see that letter by President Obama, Dr. Lee P. Brown, who's the father of community policing. But this story is similar to this. There's different lessons, and then there's a quiz to make sure. We want to make sure they understand what's going on. This is very current. Philando Castile, Mike Bennett from the Seattle Seahawks, Tamir Rice, Laquan McDonald. All of those scenarios are in here because we want the young people to know what's happening so they can know how, if I was in that situation, what would I have done differently? And my thing is this. You only know if you've been taught. If you haven't been taught, then you don't know. So our parents are teaching our young people fear all the time and don't even realize it. For instance, you're walking down the street, you want your child to come over here to you and they're playing around. You see a police officer. Hey, if you don't get over here, I'm going to tell that police to arrest you. He's going to put you in jail. What does that teach? Mm-hmm. It teaches fear, and it happens all the time. Yeah. So my thing is we have to teach our young people to be proactive and be prepared for their future. Don't allow a 20-minute encounter to derail 20 years of your life. It makes no sense.
I love that. And on that note, we're going to end. I think that's a very powerful quote. Don't let a 20-minute encounter derail more than 20 years of your life.
It could be your whole life.
It could be your whole life. It could be your whole life in an instant. So thank you so much. I'm so excited. And all of this information will be available on my website, so don't worry if you missed it. We'll definitely give you a link to keep in touch with Dwayne Bryant and see what powerful interactions he has going on based on the stop.
Absolutely.
So thank you. Again, it's April Preyar, the JustUs Junkie. See you soon.
Peace. Peace.